Code Geass Volume 2 is joining us in Union Arena this week, and whether you're a new player who's looking at the game who's just excited to see more Code Geass stuff, or a returning player who's ready to level up those Volume 1 lists, this video is going to have you covered on 6 different decks to get started with the Volume 2 update. But before I dive into today's video, I do also want to acknowledge up front the issue that we have with the Volume 2 product within Union Arena in the case of wanting to see it be improved just a little bit. This is relatively new for our North American scene. Of course, we've seen quite a few Volume 2s in the Japan market already, but consistently we do see this overlap where a new color is added, which everyone loves the new SRs. It's a new deck, new style that gets added. That's all great, but we don't see enough support, as always, for the other colors that came out earlier. So one thing I do want to address in this video, and that I hope that we see down the road, is a little bit of a restructuring to be a larger set, very similar to Volume 1, because oftentimes we've seen now with JJK Volume 2, even within the new color that gets added, it still feels a little incomplete for the decks that we can build out of it. As I'm going to talk about in the 2 blue decks for Code Geass Volume 2, I did start to see that pattern kind of unfold again. Now, that said, there are still some absolute bangers to pick up in the Volume 2 sets, both for JJK, for Bleach obviously had a lot of good stuff. Code Geass has, spoiler, we have a new meta deck that we got to talk about and acknowledge up front that is possible because of Volume 2, but I would like to see this rounded out just a little bit to make it not only a better opening experience for the community, but also to have a little bit more support for existing decks that, we'll just talk about it. Red Nunnally, the aggro deck, just didn't get any support in this set. Pizza got a lot of support, which makes sense because it was less popular and just didn't do as well. But overall, it's a long-winded way to say that as I cover another Volume 2 series, I want to at least be transparent and give my thoughts on it, that I do hope we see some improvements early on into next year, or when the next cycle of Volume 2 decks land, after we catch up from Japan side and what the releases they've been getting, right? Code Geass technically already released in Japan, so they couldn't change it all that much, but I still think, again, it is a very good set to have, and it's a very good idea to give players the opportunity to upgrade their decks, but I do hope we see this with a little bit more polish. So with my obligatory disclaimer, I had to talk about it, get it on record and all that stuff. Let's dive into the 6 different decks from Volume 2 Code Geass that you need to know. But first and foremost, we got to talk about what I was hinting at is all hail the new green overlord. And if I had a nickel for every time that Nunnally broke a meta, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it's happened twice, right? So if you followed Japan's format where we saw the red Nunnally, it made the aggro deck absolutely insane. And understandably, we didn't get it, and it got cut from our Volume 1 to be a much more healthy, balanced meta. Great. However, we now have another 2-drop Nunnally that now gets to get played off the Glaucaster, where we've previously seen Lancelot as more of this needs to high roll, needs to see these key turns where you're finding all the right pieces at the right time, but it's not as consistent. And now Bandai has just said, I will give you everything you guys possibly could want for this deck, and just make it so much better. And that's exactly what we're getting with Nunnally, not only being a double energy provider, which is super important for the Lancelot deck, but also another filtering tool, which is so important for when we are trying to streamline these turns and making sure that we're ramping up into that big 8 energy Lancelot. So again, I will stress this isn't going to be, say, a tier 0 format by any means, but it is going to be a lot of Lancelot at your locals if they are aware of this consistency update. It really reminds me to how Squad 0 got updated and just how much more insanely consistent the deck got because of the special and the stage being useful. But because we can play this for free and because it lines up very well for what the deck wants it to be doing, I would argue this was even a bigger upgrade because now we get to play the 4K raid for insane value with this list. But with out of the way, let's actually talk about it. So here is the updated list for Lancelot. And the other one to talk about is the Anya that is also a draw and filter, right? So draw 1, discard 1. So we are effectively getting 8 new filter pieces for a deck that, all things considered, a drawback of green decks, at least what we've seen so far in Union Arena, is they're not as consistent, right? So for the new players who have not either seen this list or are unfamiliar with green in Union Arena, generally it is a strategy that wants to spend turns to build up, play your double energy cards. In this case, we have Jeremiah as well as Suzaku. and then ramp up into these big 6 and 8 drop energy cards that, while taking a little bit longer to get online, are insanely strong once they do. Again, one of the challenges that this deck had previously is that your mid game was a bit awkward. I know some people strive to put in the Glaucaster raid early on, so you would still have a 4K attacker and get to replace a line, but it is truly the Nunnally that sets it over the top, and being such a strong addition for this deck that then just increases the consistency and action plan that you are trying to achieve. So we have so many draw options in green. This really does feel like it's cosplaying as a blue deck that has all the extra draw filtering, but now we do have the top end of the 6 Lancelot and 8 Lancelot, which again are volume 1 cards. Nothing has really changed from that side. It's just overall the support that it got really leveled up this deck from a, tier 2, tier 2.5, depending on who you talk to, all the way to it is now one of my top picks in the meta overall, and something that I'm expecting that we are going to see a lot of in Dallas if people are able to pick up the card. So if you are someone who wants to play these big bombs that have removal, have impact, threaten damage to, and just really apply a lot of pressure very quickly, because again, we are able to just get those characters refined back on our energy line and making sure that we're having a solid energy line to go into our 8-drop plays where it struggled previously, then definitely check out the Lancelot list. So the one caveat that I'll add here is that we're not going to go into every single list that could be updated with Volume 1, because spoiler, as I kind of hinted at earlier, there wasn't a lot of updates for some of the archetypes that we've had previously, namely the red aggro deck, as well as Gwaine. It got a 2-drop, and that's fine. Didn't need a lot. It's still a very solid deck, but there are some other ones in here that are either completely new archetypes that we're going to cover, or ones that did get enough new cards that it was a well-worthy upgrade and definitely worth talking about in this video. So for the next list that we're going to talk about is Knights of the Round, which is a new green deck joining us with Volume 2. We do again have some key cards, as you might expect from Volume 1, but this is all about the Gino and Anya going into Suzaku and having their leveled up or rated units that all combo together based on how many Knights of the Round you have, and being able to give other cards impact and making sure that you're pushing the damage. Now, Tristan is really nice. That is a 3 energy, draw a card, and it can be a 4K attacker on your turn. And so this list ultimately is a lot lower to the ground. It's definitely a more aggressive style that we traditionally see in Union Arena, where you just have 4 energy, that's your comfy spot. All your raids are going to be 4 or less, and you maybe have 1 double energy on your energy line that allows you to streamline these turns a bit better. But other than that, we have the Gino, which of course is going to be the Searcher, which is really nice to see. We have the Step in the Anya, which is important because again, it's a good raid fodder, but also lets you set up for some turns where you can have that defensive 3K block early and then move it back to your energy line so that it does give you the energy that you need. And then of course, just talking about like the Mordred, which can give us double block, which is super strong with a active trigger, as well as the new 4 energy Lancelot, which goes into the seam as well. So I do like this list because it does give us a opportunity to have very good raids and have a Searcher. But ultimately, when we think about the power level dynamic that exists between, do we want to ramp up for the 8 energy Lancelot, or do we want to play the new Knights of the Round? Knights of the Round is a total fun deck to play and does have a couple more pieces to it that we would normally expect to see, honestly, in a Volume 2, that from an idea standpoint, it is a full complete deck, but unfortunately, the raids do just fall a little shy of where I would have liked them to be. Having a 4K block on your turn is just so important. So while yes, Tristan and Mordred can go up in BP and can get that threshold, the fact that it's only during your turn is one of the limiting factors for this deck. So if you do want a lower to the ground green style of deck, if you're just more of an aggressive player in general, then definitely check out the Knights of the Round list. Moving on from there, we're getting into blue, which is the new color for Code Geass Volume 2. And again, I have to stress here, as I talked about at the first section of the video, this one does feel a little bit limited. As you are trying to look at what these two decks want to be doing, you very quickly realize that Rolo is like the star of the show and does pretty much everything that both decks want to be doing, and the secondary pieces do fall a little bit short. Now, the one thing I will say here is that the Shinkiro, by having impact, is super, super important. That is on a body and gives you that ability to close out a game where you really want to, right? This deck wants to pull off basically a triple card turn, which can be difficult when we don't have as much drawing and filtering compared to the Lancelot deck that we just talked about. But the ideal turn for this deck to push a lot of damage and making sure they're coming out ahead is going to be the 2 energy Rolo. Activate main to use the effect, go into Vincent, go into the rated form, which is going to activate it, use the resting ability one more time, remove a second blocker, and then lastly use Locket as a way to reactivate it and still make sure that you are attacking, or if by some crazy reason you just need to remove another blocker, what have you, right? But generally attacking will be better in a lot of situations. So that is something to keep in mind as you're trying to play this deck and think about these more aggressive lines. It really is pulling off that 3-card combo, making sure you can get the most value out of Vincent, and then having the Lelouch kind of backup plan to the deck, which is, again, still very strong because you're getting, again, another Searcher. It is allowing you to draw extra cards when things are rested on the battlefield, which can be really helpful for drawing into those. But again, it is a bit limited. There has a condition on it where there has to be a resting character. So you can very quickly start to see where this is a deck that requires multiple cards to line up perfectly in a turn. And even more so, if you don't have a final, there are some turns where you have to spend 4 action points to do the full combo, and you simply cannot without having a final. So that is the one thing I do want to caution against this deck, is that it can be very aggressive because of the resting ability and how strong Vincent ultimately really is, but it is a deck that is going to say, hey, you need very specific hands to get the most value out of this deck, or you're going to feel the power of level of the deck is just a little shy of where it needs to be. Now, between the two of these, because of the impact on a body, I think this is going to be the better version of the 2 blue decks. However, I do also want to give a shout out here to the other half of the blue deck, which again goes back to what I said earlier. I would have loved to have seen more of the Chinese Federation core be realized in this deck, but for this one, it's all about discarding cards for value and then using the Tianzi to get cards back through the various effects that you're discarding. And what's really cool here is this Shen Hu has an ability that when it's not rated, you can still have a option of playing a 4,500 body, but you do have to still pay the cost either way. So a 4,500 body is really important in Union Arena because the vast majority of decks are going to be playing this 4K line. So it's a free block in that regard, which is really, really nice. And then again, if we have the right cards in place, we can discard, draw, and not mind about kind of that negative impact that it would have otherwise for being on the front line. Of course, it's a lot better when you raid it. And again, you still have to keep in mind that that top part does still exist. But if you look within the raid box, then it becomes an ability to return something to your opponent's hand and also have impact on a body, which is really nice. And what again, is the star of the show between this one that requires a lot more setup, but if you really get to go the distance, live the dream. Again, we love talking about 3 to 4 card combos in blue in this set, but when Shen Hu wins Glory, allows you to get double attack with the impact. So this one is not, in my opinion, as good as the other version because it does require you to discard cards. And then if you don't have these specific pieces to get the most value out of that, you can slowly just start to burn out your resources and find yourself in a place where you're having to action draw every single turn, which admittedly can feel pretty bad. The other thing to note about this is that you do have the Li, which is just very good for, giving you the extra draw ability, so you're able to find the pieces that you need. But then otherwise, we do have just the draw discard filtering. So this is a blue deck that is well geared to go through its deck and making sure that you're finding those extra pieces, lining up into those multiple card combos that we've talked about. So we have a little bit more draw power in this version of the deck. But again, kind of the downside of it, or the not as strong part of the Shen Hu, while yes, being nice is a 4,500 blocker, for me personally, I'd rather just play the 4K impact line and getting the extra value out of going with the Lelouch side instead. But of course, both these decks are admittedly pretty similar that we've seen, so definitely choose the one that works best for you. But I would say overall in power level, they are very close to one another. I personally just lean towards the 4K impact with not having a technically downside attached to it. Now up next, we have the 4 Holy Swords, and this is a deck that had some stuff in set 1, but was just totally not all there. And this one is a super low to the ground, wants to be aggressive. We're going to be restanding cards. We're giving them extra power. We're having double impact going through. Like, This is all about getting both Genka and Zangetsu on that board, making sure that you're attacking with a 4K body, which again is just good by itself, but then threatening a restand of an impact. So this list, again, if you want to be more aggressive, be Lord of the Ground, much like the green list that we talked about, this is definitely another flavor of that style of deck and having the trait matters side to it. The downside, again, that I'll mention is that the 3 energy raids can be a little awkward to combine together, that if you don't have the trailer or if you don't have the Gekka to make sure that they all go up to 4K, it can feel a little bit bad in that regard. And there are going to be turns where you try to promote up your 3,500 attackers, try to get in some damage, but then your opponent is very quickly hitting you back with 4K, and it puts you in an awkward position where you have to make sure that you are faster, or you're going to feel like you're falling behind very, very quickly with this deck. But if you are someone who wants to play more of the, again, trait matters style of decks, and you want to have that really cool, flashy, double impact plays with Zangetsu, then definitely check out the 4 Holy Swords, which got a really nice upgrade for Volume 2, at least feeling like a more complete archetype. Again, this one is definitely a lot lower to the ground, and also just from a cost perspective is definitely going to be the most budget option out of the series overall because it doesn't have a single SR in it. Now, moving on from there, we have Pizza, which again is another deck that got quite a bit of a upgrade. And for those that are unfamiliar with this, if you maybe caught our Attack on Titan video, which I just did yesterday, and now I'm trying to get out this video as well, this is again going back to talking about certain event cards mattering and getting some type of payoff. Now, the biggest part for this deck, we had the non-raid C2 in the 4 energy 2 action point cost that said, hey, if you get up to 6 or more of those pizza cards, I get to do a lot of really cool stuff, right? But we didn't have as much filtering or support needed to really get to live that dream. So the new raid C2 is super important, that allows us to get the extra filtering and draw. Sometimes you just want to discard the pizza cards. You don't want to actually have to play them out, or just filter out other cards from your hand, drawing 3, so you're able to find those other pieces. C2 is really nice here, again, allowing you to also add a character back under the right situations of when sidelined. So it just does so much at being able to filter through your deck and eventually getting to that big C2 payoff, which is why we've cut it back to only a 2 of. Again, we are doing so much more filtering now that whenever we finally get up to that higher amount, we have a bunch of good 4K raids that honestly, the pizza is definitely more of like a secondary plan in this deck to really get the most value out of it. But when the old C2 comes online, it can be very strong with the impact and double attack. But honestly, something that you gotta at least recognize is that the 5 energy Lelouch is really good in this deck because it does give you the option of removal, which is still a very important thing to consider as you're trying to build up into that event payoff strategy that, again, does take a bit of time, much like we've seen with the blue Attack on Titan deck. It can be a little rough to get to the exact event requirement that you need. However, again, the new raid C2 goes a long way in making sure that we're able to find the right pieces. So if you are someone who loves to have these turns where you build up into this big payoff and have a super flashy finish, then definitely check out the C2 pizza list. Now, here we are at the very end with the overall, and as I promised in my last video, I updated it to have the icons now for all the decks, but here is our updated, as I always call it, format vibes. Don't strictly call it a tier list, but a quick look at where all the decks are. And again, the biggest one to call out here is at the top, that green Lancelot. Now that it has so much consistency pieces added to it, it has so much filtering, so much power behind it, it immediately jumps to the top of the list in my mind of just a super easy, streamlined, consistent deck to play that is very easy to pilot after 8 rounds of Swiss, right? It does the same thing every single game, very consistent, and just locks in on all the right pieces. We have, again, 12 draw effects. We have a searcher on top of that. We have built-in removal into our raids, which are super important, as we talked about previously. We're able to get up to a 5K, which is really important for setting up blockers. It just does so much. And then the other thing, of course, is that I updated all the Attack on Titan stuff here on the right. And then, of course, I mentioned that I would have them about the same tier level, but I think they still fall within like the lower half. This is something I'll have to test a little bit more and see if I can find some numbers that I really like. Obviously, a hybrid approach. Hybrid is the best view for these, but I do strongly feel, just because of not having to rely on 2 or 3 other cards at a time, just having the straight impact off the Lelouch is going to be the better version for it, that I would start there. And if you find that you just like the other combo better, then go ahead and try it. But again, that is a quick look at the 6 different decks to know about for Code Geass Volume 2 and a quick breakout of where I think that the format is from a health standpoint. Again, very healthy where these 2 series are joining us, but I will say I hope in the future we do see a little bit of an improvement to the Volume 2 model. Again, all things considered, Union Arena is still a very young game, and they are responding to like fixing the mulligan issues with the 2 energy cost cards. There's a lot of improvements that they're making, but I really hope we can kind of nail it down in making the Volume 2 experience better for both players and store owners that really are excited to get more support for their favorite IP, but is a little bit frustrating to open as we see it only focused around, again, in this case, one very specific deck that gets all the love and support, where unfortunately the others fell a little short. So definitely let me know your thoughts, both on Volume 2s as a whole, but also where Code Geass lands. Are you a returning player that's very excited to see Code Geass in the spotlight again? Or are you someone who is newer and just excited to see Lancelot come into the fold and be a meta consideration for the Dallas Regional coming up in just, 3 weeks at the time of recording this? Not that long. So I'm very curious to see how these 2 series line up for our top 16 or top 8 that we'll have for the Dallas Regional. But until next time, my friends, stay safe, stay hydrated, and we'll see you in the next video. Cheers.